All right. Good evening, you guys. Thank you for joining us in Bridging Black Love. Tonight we will be talking about colorism. We did plan to have a couple other young women on the phone, but it's just the three of us, it looks like. So we're going to get right into the questions. We really don't need to go too formal with it. I'll just ask a question and I'll just call on one of you guys to start us off, and then We'll go from there. Let's pick an order. Anthony, we'll have you go first. Eddie second, and then I'll go third, and then we'll go on to the next question.
Sure.
Okay. Okay. So the first question is, how old were you when you first experienced colorism or became aware of it?
I think I was in elementary school when I first became aware of it, based on a conversation with some of my aunts who commented on a girl that I liked. And so, of course, she was lighter skinned and all my aunts are mostly darker skinned, and they were talking about how as she got older and got acne, her face would be all red and pimply and it's not going to be cute. Mm-hmm. And that was the first experience that I had with it. And they were like, all the brown girls that look like you, they're going to be beautiful because their skin going to be clear, which of course we know that's not true. But, right. That was their expectation to kind of get me to change the perspective on what I thought was attractive.
And do you recall what grade that was?
Like 6th or 7th grade, somewhere around
there. Okay. Eddie?
Honestly, don't remember. I mean, I will say more so with family directly. I have cousins. Of all shades, but a lot of the female cousins are lighter complexion, and they would refer to me as dark skin or dark. And really, yeah, that's pretty much when I was made aware that I was different, because I just felt like, hey, we are the same, doesn't matter. It was like, oh, I'm different, really? Okay.
And do you recall around what age that was?
I don't know. I know, like in the 2nd grade, back when integration was going on, when I was in school, they busted us out of the hood to a white school. And that was really our first time being exposed and being around just white people in general, just right next to them. You're in class with them every day. You're interacting. You're learning with them, and that's your first time actually, like, really just seeing the white girl, your age, and you might find somebody attractive just because of who they are. It wasn't because they were white, just because, might have been because they were smart or whatever. But really, that was my first time really being exposed to a person of a different ethnicity in that environment.
So I'll answer the question. And I was telling Eddie about this earlier. I became aware of colorism. I think I was aware of hair textures before I was aware of skin tone, but I did realize that most of the relatives in the family that had a preferred hair texture were of a certain skin tone as well. So I recall a time when I was going to the candy truck. We lived in the hood. I was going to the candy truck with my favorite cousin who was 2 years younger than me. I may have been 7 or 8. And so she was like 5 or 6. And there was this drug dealer in the area that was, everybody thought he was really cute, talking about how handsome he was. He had the best car. And so I recall him, which was inappropriate on a whole bunch of levels, but I didn't understand how inappropriate it was. But I recall him fawning over my little cousin and saying how pretty she was and how gorgeous her eyes was and her skin color. And when she got older, she was going to be his girlfriend. And so he proceeded to give her, he proceeded to give her some money so she could go to the candy house and get some candy. And although I was there with her and also, a small enough child, he didn't give me anything, then didn't say anything to me. It was almost like I wasn't even there. And so it was in that moment that I was aware, I think made more aware of colorism and the preference for, a certain skin tone.
Interesting.
I'm not sure if Jackie can hear us. So
I'm here. I
okay.
can hear you.
Jackie's
Did
here.
you go answer that first question as well, Jackie?
I'm sorry. What was the question? I'm sorry. What was
The
it?
question was, how old were you when you first experienced colorism or became aware of it?
Oh my gosh. Um, I want to say it was middle school. Junior high. Definitely junior high. Um, and it was very subtle. I don't think it was very blatant. I think that people noticed my weight before I became aware of my color. And it was just, we were at a church camp, and people young guys my age, we'll say about 12, would just fawn over people with lighter complexions. And it was just because the fact that they were lighter complexion. And, I grew up in Seattle, and all I started hearing when I got to junior high was, I prefer that girl because she's white. Her hair looks better. Her hair is real. I had real hair. But they were just like, I want light-skinned babies. That's what it was. I want light-skinned babies. And it was from the men who were, attractive. And they were like, I want light-skinned babies. I want to continue that. I don't want dark kids. I want light-skinned babies. And that was around when I was 12.
Mm.
Wow.
Okay. So second question, and we'll start again with Anthony. Do you have a skin tone preference, and how do you think that preference developed?
When I realized that colorism was a real thing, changed my perspective, and my preference became brown girls. And then, and it's kind of sad because I didn't realize this until I was in college, but the way I evaluated light-skinned girls was imagining them being a brown-skinned girl, and if they were cute as a brown-skinned girl, then I thought they were attractive, which is kind of stupid, but I didn't realize that until I was doing it until I went to college.
Right. Wow. Eddie?
Skin tone preference. Again, we had this conversation. With me, I say no. Simply because I've had girlfriends of all colors and complexions, except white. But um, I'm one that's drawn to a person by their features. So if I like your features, it doesn't matter what the tone of your skin is. If I like your nose, your eyes, your smile, the shape of your face, um, the way you wear your hair, the way it's styled, the way everything comes together, then that's what I like about you. So it doesn't matter if you're, dark skin or light skin in that.
And see, for me, all that became an evolution of the realization.
Hmm.
And I was looking more at the features that I liked, and it really didn't matter the skin tone.
Right. Yeah, because if a person's beautiful to you, that's what they are.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So me, I will say, I developed a preference as early as I could remember, because I remember having a crush on Blair Underwood. I think I was
Oh,
probably in the third grade. And I think that my preference was shaped because my dad was everything to me. So I thought my dad was the best looking man on earth. And I think so I naturally gravitated to brown skinned men, brown skinned boys. However, brown skinned boys I was not their preference. And so they would rarely ever talk to me if we were playing a game of, high go, whatever, or
Hmm.
anything,
I
they're
go with it.
always fixed on the mixed girl, the light girl, or the girl, with extra long hair, some sort of exotic look to her. And so I wasn't their preference, but the mixed boys, the lighter skinned boys, they loved them some me. So my first few boyfriends were light skinned, but not because they were my preference. It's just because that's who seemed to appreciate my skin tone. So that became not a preference, but that became what I would. So then when I got older, and really more so when I started traveling and going to different states and interacting with men in different states, the reception of my skin tone was way better than it had ever been in California. So I was finally able to kind of exclusively date my preference.
Misha, I
Okay.
think you hit
Yeah.
a really good point there. Regionally, if not in a city or wherever you are, you can be popular or hot in a certain spot, and you can go to another place and not, nobody's checking for you, like for real. And it's not that you're any different. It's I I've traveled as well, and yeah, you go one place and it's like, oh, this is the spot here. Everybody's out at me. It's like, hey, but then you go back home and it's
Right.
like, okay, nobody's looking at you, and you wonder
Yep.
what is it. But
Right.
again,
Yeah.
I
That was my experience.
go ahead, Jackie.
No, I said that was my experience as well.
Hmm. And that's why
I don't think that.
I think
Go ahead.
people
I'm sorry.
should be open to traveling if they're genuinely looking for a mate. Be open to get out of state, because love is not always down the street around the corner. It's just not, and you might have to
Yeah.
go out of that element to find that person that appreciates you for who you are.
And that's an interesting question, Misha, because people think that I have a preference. People tell me I have a preference, but I don't think that I do. I think I'm pretty open. I've dated people of all races. Like, well, I guess I do have a preference because I prefer Black men. But as far as like the color, I think most of the people I've dated have been light skinned because that's usually generally what gravitates towards me more so than anything else. Until I went into Atlanta, and it was a whole different experience of different men. But here in Seattle, it felt very, very colorblind. It felt very colorblind when dating, and it was it was very interesting growing up here.
Right.
We talk about that all the time, Misha. It's like, it's very, very, very different, and people of all hues say it's very interesting dating in Seattle.
Right.
Doesn't matter if you're light skinned, dark skinned, you could be green, but
Right.
they think you're Black. No.
Time to move, Jackie.
And also,
Yeah.
Hey,
Hi, Hassan.
I'll repeat the question for Hassan. So
yeah,
he can jump in on question 2 with us. So this question is: do you have a skin tone preference, and how do you think that preference developed?
I don't personally. I'm open to dating anyone, but everyone that I've dated, and even my ex-wife, were all Black women, right? But I have this understanding that obviously, anyone can connect with whoever it is out there, and if there's that connection and they fall in love or they end up loving each other, that's them. We should appreciate that as a people, 100%. But for me, I guess I've always gravitated towards Black women, and that's why all the women that I've dated, and even my ex-wife, were all Black, right? But in the context, I think Jax, you and I talked about this on Facebook on the messenger, the issue of colorism. For me, I travel a lot for work because currently doing consulting work and also working with the Pan African Council on projects. And our main projects are Brazil, working with the Black diaspora there, and also the continent, since the Pan African Council has a formal connection with CEDAW, which is in charge of the African Union. I've seen colorism as a huge issue, not only here. Here, actually, it's not as big. If you go to Brazil, colorism is huge, right? And we have to look at the history, whereby Brazilians before had this racial democracy. A light-skinned person could say they're white and it's accepted, right? 100%. So what I saw in Brazil literally made me think about the US and even Africa, because for me, I grew up here since I was a little kid. I don't even remember back home, right? So I'm just, if we all go back home to Somalia, I'm sorry, we're all gonna be tourists. Don't ask me for directions or anything. Right? It's just like looking at our context here in terms of colorism, I was like, yo, we're not even as close as how Brazil has colorism. Theirs is so toxic to a point whereby you can feel it, right? You understand. Like, so it was interesting going to the favelas and you'd see the diversity in there as Black people, and then you go into meetings with some of their government folk, and you can definitely, when you mention racism or anything, they have to talk about colorism as well. Here, when we talk about racism, we tackle racism, right? We don't have all these other pieces. such as colorism and all that, whatever, or xenophobia. So there, I just feel bad for the community, but at the same time, it's more they have solutions for that. And now the Afro Brazilians actually being the higher population, like they're the majority, right? That's another thing that we don't know. In Brazil, black people are, more than the white folk there. So you have they're the largest number outside of Africa in terms of the black diaspora, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have here in the U.S. and we have Colombia. So Brazil now is actually becoming more woke, and it's not more of a performative wokeness because of what's happening here in America, but basically they're starting to embrace their blackness, and that's the beauty of what's happening in Brazil. And that, when we talk about colorism and love, that's an important thing because I feel like we can go back to 1712, that Willie Lynch letter, right? Separate, even the female Negro from the male Negro, right? The older Negro from the young Negro. And also don't forget the light skinned Negro from the dark skinned Negro. So these are things that have been ingrained in us for centuries,
Right.
right? And it has worked ever since we were like, in kindergarten, we've been receiving Eurocentric education.
Mm-hmm.
Understand the
Yeah.
West is the best. And the lighter you are, the more opportunities you get. But from when it comes to this topic about colorism, I always think of Brazil 100%. Because of how deep it is. And, in our societies, back home in Africa, like I keep hearing about, women using lightning cream, those skin lightening creams and all that stuff. That's like basically, I consider it something, a mental piece, as in you just don't love yourself, so you have to change your tone fully. Like, how much can you hate yourself? And sometimes I don't blame the individual. I would blame like the system, whatever whatever they put it in her or his brain, because men are doing it too. In
Right.
some,
Mm-hmm.
we have seen that.
Yeah.
So what kind of mental slavery was ingrained in someone's uh, mind that it made that person hate who they are and
You
want
see
to
a
Yeah.
lot
be
of that in the Netflix movies also.
Yes.
You can,
Yes.
big
uh,
time.
I've
Yeah.
been watching a lot of them because they've been like hitting the must watch section a lot. So I've been watching quite a few of them, and I pick up that undertone a lot in a lot of those movies.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
But not just
Because-
that, just even in the daily pictures and photos of the Instagram and social media, the first thing a lot of women do is they lighten the picture, they filter it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I've met people off of dates, and it's like, okay, you don't look like this picture you have here, and they've lightened it up 3 or 4 shades, and it's just like, all right, yeah, it's still you, but why'd you have to do that? I've even seen a person do it in person. As soon as they took the picture, it's already lightened up, and
Yeah,
boom, it's online, and it's just like, why? That's not a natural picture of you. Just
exactly.
represent who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I even agree with that. I agree with that. Even with when I was watching P Valley, on P Valley, it was so many references to like,
Oh
oh,
yeah,
light skin, and it was just like she doesn't have to work as hard. She, Haley didn't have to work as hard as Mercedes. She could just get it by just walking in the room. Because they made so many references. Oh, light skin don't work hard. Light skin don't work hard,
and
and
that's
it's
Right.
in
that's a
so many
slavery
things,
reference.
in so many
It-
shows.
yeah.
Right. And I think the last question actually is gonna get us back to some of that. So I'm gonna go into the third question, so we can kind of get to that back into this conversation about some of the root causes of colorism and some of the issues associated with. So we'll start again with Anthony. Do you recall your first experience with colorism in dating? And was that either a negative or positive experience for you?
That question I kind of struggle with because I mean, I've experienced it because I've kind of put it forward, but I
Mhm.
don't think that I've ever received it.
Okay.
So I can't necessarily say it's been a positive or a negative thing. It's always been something that's been in my mind. Now, as far as a negative thing goes, I've never had a woman tell me, "Oh, yeah, I wouldn't date you because you're dark skinned." I've never had that. But I've also never told a woman I won't date you because you're light or because you're dark.
Mm.
It's always been, I guess it's always been something that in my mind I've thought about, but never, communicated it externally.
How about you, Eddie?
That's kind of one of those unspoken things that you would experience during dating. Just like Anthony, I've never had anyone tell me directly that that's why they didn't, allow me to date them or approach them, because generally that type of filter happens, in your mind or whatever, or in their mind, uh, for whatever reason. Yeah, I haven't come across anyone that actually said that, specifically.
Hmm.
But I'm thinking positive or negative experience. Even now with and we just had this conversation, Misha, with the I want to say glorification of blackness
Mm-hmm.
by saying, "Oh, your melanin's popping," which, okay, that means more or less you're of a darker hue. Or, oh, I see you chocolate or butterscotch, or adding some type of flavor to the blackness that you are.
Mm-hmm.
Versus, you tan, or whatever, red bone, or whatever type of term you put on it. Um, that's kind of what we see or hear now. Um, it can be taken positively or negatively
Mm-hmm.
depending on who it's from and more or less how you feel at the moment.
Mm.
um, but why can't it just be that I like you? Why do you have to put a tone or a reference to a flavor or food or something to it? Why can't, I just like you, black woman or black man,
Right. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
and I was saying earlier that as far as my experience with colorism and dating, again, I was made aware, back when we were playing High Go Get It. The chocolate girls were not the preference. When I started dating, I was married for a long time and with my ex-husband since I was 15. So I really was kind of sheltered from that and had to step back out again at 35 into dating, and experiencing colorism and dating at 35 was kind of like a shell shock to me. Um, and it wasn't, it was pretty overt. I'd have people say, "Oh, I normally don't like dark skinned girls, but I like you," or there would be this, over appreciation for my body type versus my beauty. That they were just attracted to me because of how I looked to them. It was more so, you're a dark skinned girl, but you got, but you have this going for you, or you shaped like this. So, I'll fool with you. A person that I was like, I found myself enamored with, right after, first person I dated seriously after my ex-husband, would always talk about how when he grew up, he couldn't get the light skinned girls. He loved the light skinned girls. He wanted the Spanish chicks. And so when he got to where he was kind of like the flavor of the month or whatever you want to call it, that's what he started to date, because he felt like he finally got to have what he felt he deserved. But because he hadn't had positive experiences with those women, those mixed women, those Spanish women, that he would reference and say, "Oh, now I'm going to be Team Chocolate. You made me Team." But again, never a compliment on how beautiful he thought I was. It was always, "Oh, your body, this or that part of you is what I'm attracted to." So it was made very clear that my skin tone was not his preference. So, my ex fiance, who I dated for, was with for a couple of years, was the first person as an adult, and ever, not as an adult, ever, who made me feel as though ultimate preference. That if he could have his choice in the world of women, it would be a woman that looked like me. And that was a very powerful feeling for me. So although I had very negative experiences with colorism prior, that was a time when colorism kind of worked, or I felt the positive effect of being the preference. So I would say that that particular experience was felt more like a positive experience for me.
Do you think that it happens more to women than it does to men?
Oh, I do.
The negative
Yeah,
emotion?
I do.
yeah.
You think so?
Yeah.
Nah, because the light skinned brothers, they've been in style, for a minute. They say that. Dark skinned brothers in style right now,
Yeah.
Oh
So,
no.
the light skinned curly hair dude, what we do, we give our digs, oh, the pretty boy, da da da, try to
Mhm.
tear him down a little bit. Now it's, oh, you got the Idris Elba popping, or, whoever's hot at the time, Denzel, or, whatever. We try to embody their person as the
Mhm.
ideal, person.
The
Right.
representative of the color, right?
Exactly.
Jackie.
Oh my gosh. Mine, I like seriously, it started when I was young. I remember dating my high school boyfriend. I dated him for years. And his father was just like a shade lighter than me, married to a white woman. And he used to tell my boyfriend, he's like, Jackie's smart. Jackie's great. She's a great woman. She's a great girl, because I was a girl at the time. He's like, she's too dark. You should not be with somebody that dark. And then my college boyfriend, his dad was also dark skinned, and he was like, she's too dark for you. And so those were my early experiences with that. Or I would get, like, when I went to Clark, people were like, oh, you're pretty for a dark skinned girl.
Mhm.
Excuse me. But I also got the converse of that with, when I dated black men. They're like, oh, you're not black enough. Like, you're dark skinned, but you're not what we expect you to be. You're not like this. You don't have these certain type of attributes. So it was like, in a way, like, why are you not like that? You know what I'm saying? So it was very
You don't
weird.
have the dark skinned girl personality, right?
Yeah,
Right. And that's
that's a
what it
different
was.
type
They
of
were like,
brother.
you
Yeah.
sound like this, you act like this. And why is it a negative connotation when you're, first of all, a black woman in general, but then when you're a dark-skinned black woman, you have to be a certain way. And I didn't understand it. But with my high school boyfriend, because I was best friends with his sister, I realized as I got older, it was because his own projection. When he was younger, he had to sit on the porch with his dark-skinned siblings. The light-skinned siblings were allowed to go in their grandmother's house. The dark-skinned siblings had to sit on the porch. He had light-skinned children so that they wouldn't feel that same kind of oppression that he felt growing up. And so I think, Eddie, you spoke about it earlier about some of the self-love that we had. And that's kind of the thing. And I have family members who don't really embrace their melanin. And I've heard so many conversations about where light skin is prettier. I want a light skinned baby. I remember when I had my son, somebody came to my house like, oh, your baby's going to be so dark. Oh, girl, what are you going to do? And I was like, love him. Like,
Okay. Yeah.
love him. I don't know. Like, I don't know. But yeah, that's what it was when I was growing up, is where people's fathers were like, oh, she's got it. She's got a great head on her shoulders, but she's not good enough for you because she's too dark for you. So that was really demoralizing. It was very demoralizing. And I'm like, well, what does the color of my skin have to do with anything? But I also realized that plays into the things that we've been oppressed with for over 400 years. House Negroes versus field Negroes, and how it just pertains to life. And I've matured enough to understand it. But when I was younger, I was like, that's hurtful to hear that I'm not good enough just because of the color of my skin. That's crazy. Amongst my own people.
So they would say that to you or around you for you to hear it, or
Oh no, it
something.
wasn't so that I could hear it. Like, my boyfriend, like, his dad would kind of just be like, he'd be like, hi, Jackie. And I'd be like, hey. But he would just, and that's what it was. It was like certain family events. They'd be like, oh, are you gonna bring Jackie? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, well, she's a pretty girl, she's a cute girl, but don't you think she's too dark for you? And so his sister and himself, like, I was friends with the whole family. And they were just like, yeah, they just feel like, dad feels like maybe, he should date somebody else because you're dark. So it was kind of just a conversation.
Right.
Because I didn't feel warm to him. Now that I'm an adult, like, he's always like, oh, hey, how are you doing? But I also had to realize his own hurt. Sometimes we don't understand what people have gone through. So we don't understand their story and their background. But still, I just felt like it was just horrible. But yeah, they mentioned it. But the other guy's dad, the college, yeah, he said that to my face.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's more of I think you're right. It's more of a generational thing that needs to be broken at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hurt people hurt people.
Right.
They do.
Yeah.
They really, really do. But it's a lot of things. Like I have I've heard of family members who are just like, I wanted light skinned children so they could have more advantages in life. That it's going to be hard if they are dark skinned. And I'm dark skinned and I know what I've been subjected to. So I don't want my children to experience that. So I'm going to do what I can to not have dark skinned children. But little do they know we're Black people and sometimes we get a broad end of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like,
Mhm.
surprise, you didn't want that, but look what you got.
Right.
Exactly.
Hassan.
Well, for me, I haven't experienced that whereby someone told me of their preference because by the time we even get to dating, the person like would be, and I thank my dad for this because I grew up as a Pan African. Like because of my dad, I grew up as a Pan Africanist, so it was always like this pro-black thing. Looking back to Marcus Garvey and stuff, so I think women that I talked to already knew my stand as being pro-black, and they would not push probably, hey, I prefer a lighter skinned person than you or something like that. And also, I grew up in a household whereby I have sisters who are light skinned to a point whereby you think that they're Latinx, and my brother and I were darker. My brother's actually darker than I am, and you'd actually think
Mm.
he's from South Sudan. That's how his complexion is. So we have extremes, and that just tells us how
Yes.
we're beautiful as Black people. Two Black people can actually, because of our backgrounds or whatever we come from, we can actually end up with a child who's lighter than both parents. That's the beauty that God gave us as Black people. We give birth to the world because that's where life is from, right? So I never got that experience of someone telling me their preference, you know, in terms of if they like me for my complexion or they want someone
Mm.
who's lighter or whatever. Um, because by the time we get to that, they definitely know what my stance is, as a person, and just, I used to get this piece of why are you pro-black, right? As a Pan Africanist and all that stuff. Maybe that's the only thing I got. But in terms of colorism, I didn't receive that piece. Yeah. And I think Anthony had a great point. Hurt people, right? So that preference of, I want a child who's lighter or this and that. We're just, we're feeding into that, with the lynch letter and also the mental slavery that we've been left with when it comes to such pieces. Because, you got to know who you are as a
Right.
person, and all that. So when can we break that cycle? When is it? Can we stop, the jokes? And I'm to blame for that too with my homies. Like, yo, it's light skin season because Steph Curry been, winning. So we're gonna have a comeback. We're gonna have a comeback. It's the light skin brothers right now who got it. So those type of jokes we have, I feel like we're also feeding into this notion of colorism itself, right? It may be jokes, but we're giving something life, right? So,
Right.
so
Mhm.
we can stop, just like Anthony said. When can we stop with that?
Right.
Right.
Okay, so this next question may be a little redundant because I think all of us kind of answered it previous responses to the question. So, but how have your experiences in regards to colorism and dating changed with age? For example, are you approached more? Do you find that you are, quote unquote, preferred more than you were in your younger years, Anthony?
Do I think I'm more preferred now than when I was younger?
Well, just how colorism and dating has changed with age, if for you in your own personal experience.
Well, I think how it's changed because I've been able to move around from my local community. I've been able to see more of the diaspora than I was exposed to as a kid. Because when I was younger, I mean, you was either light, dark, black, or white. That was it.
Right.
And as I got to move around, you start to meet, Afro Latinos and so forth, Latinas and so forth, and like we would say like you're African, but when you actually meet somebody from the continent, then it's like it's a completely different thing
Right.
than coming from Arkansas because you wasn't exposed to that when we were kids.
Mhm.
So I think that's how it's changed. It gave me a lot more perspective and a lot more access.
Hmm. Yeah. Eddie.
Colorism and dating with age. I mean, I noticed, yeah, the trends, because there are times when it is promoted amongst black people that a particular look or shade is popular or in style.
Mhm.
Um, I've seen it. I can't really say I've experienced it because I just don't look at it like that. Like, oh, I'm in style right now. Let me go out and let me go out and see what I can see, and see who can holler at me, But I know it's going on. Like for instance, okay, we'll say media has a huge influence. So you got a popular actor, what is it, Queen Sugar, and brother on there,
Mhm.
dark skinned brother, and now when you see women talking about him, they're looking for someone like him. And
Mhm.
I honestly don't like how we follow a lot.
Mhm.
We can't really like appreciate an individual. Everyone wants like one thing. Like women start looking the same. They want to look like one particular look, or they're going after this one dude who's 6 foot, whatever, got a beard. This particular shit. It's like one look. Like there's only one look that you have to have at one time. No,
Mhm.
you can have different looks, and they're all beautiful.
That's a
Just
Right.
whole
find
other.
what you like. Yeah.
Yeah. Triggered. They're triggered. 6 foot
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
beards. Oh gosh.
Right.
And you know what? Not even 7 years ago, beards weren't even popular, but now everybody and mama got beards. You got 20-year-old cats with beards. Like, how you get a beard? You should barely have a mustache, you got a full beard. It's crazy.
Right.
you know.
And they're making the fake ones also, like
Oh yeah.
with weaves and what. And
Yeah, you get
the
the
first time
weave
I
beard.
saw it, I was
Yo,
like, who in the world would get this kind of mess?
That's bananas.
hey, Eddie, that's a good one, bro.
I mean, real talk though.
Huh?
Yeah, come out with fake beard just so that's the look women looking for. So guys hit it, just like
Catfish.
yeah,
Yeah.
the catfish, the hatfish, the wig fish,
Mhm.
the
It's all
lashes
kind of
And then
fishy
fish.
out here. Oh
and
my
then they
God.
pull it off and put it on the dummy
Put it on
on
the
top when they go to bed at night.
put it on the mannequin head,
Yes, okay, I would say for me, it's changed because I feel like I'm allowed to celebrate my now. And being here in the South is a very different experience than I had again in California. I'm much older now here, where there's definitely room for appreciation for variances from that preferred look of the time, or that one actress is popular and everybody thinks is beautiful. There seems to be more variety, more accepted variety now. So I would say with age, I feel allowed to embrace my darkness. What makes me
What makes you go black?
in this
Okay.
typical shape or whatever. So yeah, with age, I think it's just been a more positive dating experience as far as colorism is concerned.
Okay.
Jackie.
I feel like I'm popping in these streets right now, for real. Like as far as whatever, I feel like I am. Even like, it's always been like magical once I step foot in any other airport but SeaTac. It's like, whoa, hey, what? I used to be like, what? You talking to me? Okay. But now, even in Seattle, y'all, I got 3 looks. Like the other day, I was like,
What?
oh my gosh, in Seattle. Can you believe it? I can't. But yeah, it's just things are changing. And I feel like it's now, like you guys said, it's kind of like a movement. So I don't know. I was popping like 5 years ago
Mhm.
once I, became single. Actually 8 years ago. But no, I think it's different now. I think that there's a lot of people who are more open to different things than there were when I was younger. When I was younger, it was like, oh, you're not me in particularly, but they would say like dark skin, oh, you're African booty scratcher. Look at your hair. Your hair doesn't do this. Your hair doesn't do that. And so I think now people are just more in tune. There's so many more other ideals of beauty. And I love that. I love that we can celebrate so many other ideals of beauty. It's not one blonde hair, blue eyed, or, whatever. It's just so many different representations. And I feel like I'm a part of that representation. So I do feel like it's awesome. But that's just how it is. I don't know. I feel like it's different. I feel like a change is coming. And I just hope that it's something that's not fleeting, like you said, Eddie, and it's not just for the times. I'm hoping that people will be more open to accepting other people and getting to know them. And, somebody said, so you got some looks. What does that mean? That means that growing up here, I wasn't necessarily what people wanted, per se. And so when I went to college in Atlanta, the opportunities of dating opened up, the field of dating opened up, and it was more options. And then since I've been back here, I moved back to Seattle 8 years ago. It wasn't necessarily like, I don't know. I still think there's a type here. Hassan, what do you think? Do you think there's a type here that some Black men gravitate towards?
On my end, I don't think so. I'm talking about the folks I know, right? When it comes to the Black men I know, I don't think there's some gravitate towards light skin or dark skin or something like that. But and once again, it's just I can speak for my close circle, right? My best friends, right? That I know very well. But Seattle has its own vibe. Seattle silo. Because when I moved out here to Seattle, I remember I just coming out of college and I moved out here. My mom actually moved out here in '02. I moved a little bit after. So when I showed up, it's different from Colorado. Like Colorado, when you see Black folk, we were like actually a chocolate city, even if it was 10 of us. We were together. If it was on campus, we create our own thing. But here, it's more like I had to go out and be like, "Yo, what's up?" So I didn't find it super welcoming. So it was a siloed community, fully. So that's Seattle for me, but it has changed obviously because I'm a person who like reaches out to people and stuff like that. Back to Amish's question in terms of age, I mean growth, age and the way we look at things now. For me, I don't see any difference. Once again, maybe it's because I'm in my own bubble of Pan Africanism, maybe, right? And thinking differently and all that stuff. But yeah, right now a lot of people are surfing the wave, obviously. Being, gravitating towards Black folk because folks are, trying to push the anti-racist piece of the notion. I hope there's authenticity to that, right?
Right.
And all that stuff. And people, even when you look at organizations or groups that are trying to do racial equity toolkits or whatever, I hope they can operationalize them, right? And it's just not for the hype right now. Even in Brazil right now, Google Brazil and Facebook Brazil are doing a couple of stuff with the Pan African Council, and it's just I feel like it's like a time. Is it a check box, like as in we're working with a diverse to talk about diversity or whatever? Because for years it has always been a checkbox, and personally, I'm skeptical. I still think it is until a group comes out and they say that they're anti-racist, right? 100%. But in terms of the colorism piece, for me, I haven't seen a lot of changes with age and growth.
Right.
Yeah, and I was told by somebody that this person that came back into my life as an adult, and when we were in high school, he was like, "Oh, I always had a crush on you." I'm like, "How come you didn't say anything?" He was like, "Oh, well, he was like the times were different, and it was like all my boys were into this." That's weak. That's weak as hell. Like you have to go by what your friends think is fly. But I guess when you're like 16, 17, I don't know. That's just whack.
Jackie, that's truth though. Okay, so your friends, your circle can influence who you find attractive as well, especially during those younger ages, because you want them to approve of who you're with as well. You might like somebody, but they don't like them, so you don't say anything.
At that time, a lot of people are struggling with their own identity, so their friends become their identity. And so when we're looking at that as our now adult mind, we think, "Oh, that was weak as hell." But back then, it was some real serious business because we want to be accepted within our circle.
Right.
Definitely. And on my end, most of my friends got married early, right? And some of them, their kids are like right now starting college, or two of them actually, their kids finished college. But the thing is, they started way early versus me. I started late. I got married late, got kids late. Like my son is 6 years old, I got a 2-year-old daughter, daddy's girl. Yes. It's just maybe the reason why I didn't see any changes with my friends is because they got married super early, and it's more like even when we went out, it's more like, oh, I like that light skinned chick or that dark. Those conversations never came up, right? So it's kind of interesting like that on my end. So, but
Yeah.
I know
Oh,
amongst other brothers there is also that strong preferences, and when you're seen with a light skinned chick, she's that fine, but when she's super chocolate, there's a different way the society looks at her and stuff like that. So it's really interesting.
Right.
Okay,
Okay.
that
So
was my last point, Misha. You remember we had this conversation about okay, say a brown skinned or dark skinned guy starts dating light skinned woman, and his peer group is, oh, you like the light skin, you like the red bones, and vice versa. Why is it that we call out someone for the contrast versus if they were close to the same color? You wouldn't say anything like that, you know. And
because
now you've typecasted them to like a particular, say that's your type now, just because that person is so different in appearance from your skin tone.
then I
Mhm.
think you answered it. I mean, it's because it's the contrast. It's because it's what is different from you, but that was also considered, the primary preference for many, maybe not all, but for many, that particular group of women were the preference. So they're calling out because it's different from them. So it's igniting something in them that has always possibly made them feel like they weren't the preferred. They weren't the preference of the majority. Um, so I think it's just a insecurity or something that kind of, like they say, a hit dog will holler. It does. It makes you become apparently, it makes you become super aware of your perceived inadequacies or places you felt like, you weren't good enough or you weren't preferred. And here is another example of that. And so I think that's where it comes from because it's contrast.
Definitely. And Misha, brother Eddie, please, all of you, feel free to educate me on this one. Isn't it interesting? We see these things; they're very small, right? Like someone just making a comment about, oh, he's with a light skinned chick or he's with a dark skinned chick.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me of Malcolm X's speech, the one that he talks about, "Who taught you to hate yourself?"
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Remember that speech. So it's more like the more, and this is what I think, the more that we start seeing it as something small and we keep, entertaining, those type of conversations or whatever, it's just going to be remnants that still cripple us as a people, right?
Right.
And the divide and conquer is, it just, like we're still going to be separated because there's a reason why this was implanted in our heads,
Mm-hmm.
at the differences, and just we start entertaining whether it's a light skinned sister or a dark skinned, we should see them as a sister. Like we should not,
I
push
agree.
this light and negative piece because once again, as we're talking about this piece right here, I just that's the first thing that came to my mind when Malcolm X was like, "Who taught you to hate yourself?"
Right.
True.
yeah,
Yep.
So I
true.
think the final question kind of gets to that, and that is, what do you think the most negative aspect of colorism is? I know there's many, but if you could call out one that you think is the most negative aspect of it, what would that be? And we'll start with.
The most negative aspect, I think, the financial impacts that it has on our community,
Mm-hmm.
because we divide ourselves financially by skin tone a lot of times. The lighter skins usually get promoted a lot faster, a lot quicker, and they don't hold the door open for anybody else, so
Mm-hmm.
that you can do that. So I think that's to me, the most negative aspect of it financially, because it's something that we always talk about. How the black community is so far behind financially, and we do it to ourselves, and they do it to us, and we perpetuate it along the way.
Right.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right. Absolutely. Eddie.
I think Anthony made a real good point. And I wasn't thinking about that because when he said that, I immediately thought about the Dominican Republic and Haiti, how that was still separated light skinned black people, dark skinned black people. Light
Mhm.
skinned black people got economically sound, still have trees, land is fertile, life is good. You come on the black side,
Mm.
struggle, land is stripped. You
Yeah.
know, people actually, and I saw this documentary, people get up early in the morning to trade their goods across the border, and they only let in so many people, and they're darker complexion. They talked about how they were treated
Mhm.
once they got over there. It was like, and that's French and that's Spanish, and they're both still African black, but French and Spanish mixed. And the Spanish accepted the black people as their own, but it was the French who separated and said, "Hey, you're lighter, then we're gonna treat you different," type of
Mhm.
thing. And it's you're right. It does create an economic difference. It creates the way we look at ourselves differently. Um, I noticed this years back, even in the media. When was the last time you saw a black couple on a show? Few and far between. You might catch one blackish, maybe, maybe Black Lightning. It's not a lot. Even in
Mhm.
commercials, you will see a black woman, and she could be light skinned to dark
Mhm.
with
Yeah.
a white man,
Mhm.
but you rarely see a black man with
Yeah.
anyone. So he's being
Also,
filtered out of the whole relationship equation as far as black women, along
Mhm.
with songs like Being Independent, all this empowerment of you don't need a man, you can do it on your own. But then you throw images of somebody who's not black, and you know, it, it becomes tough because
Right.
now we don't like ourselves, we don't like our own people, and economically it becomes a struggle because if you're doing everything yourself, you're actually working harder than you need to when you can have a partner who's willing to help you, and get through life.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's the same thing with the divisive of colorism. Always being made aware of, how different we are, and being able to cast us into these different compartments so that we can always infight. I mean, it's kind of the same thing between black men and black women, which I think that, that's the same thing. It's at the root, all of it has the same root causes. If you can successfully divide a group of people, they're never going to unite and fight together because they're always going to be arguing over whose pain is more important, who's preferred over the next, and we'll stay busy with that, and not unite and go
mhm.
for the things that we should be going for, so that we can have to, have racism being an issue and systemic oppression. So, I think the divisiveness of colorism is the biggest issue. I mean, it's going to impact us financially, and that's across the board.
True.
Mhm.
I think, go ahead. I think, Jackie, I think that it's me after you. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah, for me, it's division. It's divisive.
Yeah.
When I'm in these Facebook groups or anything, and I hear something, it triggers me. When I hear people like, oh, well, dark skinned people this or light skinned people that, and it's like, wait a minute, and I get so like, ooh, I really get triggered when I hear things, and especially when it pits one versus the other, when it puts one on top of the other, one higher, one lower. It doesn't matter how it goes. It doesn't matter if it's dark skin winning or light skin winning. It's just divisive. We are Black people. We come in all shades. We're all hues, and that is my biggest issue: is how divisive it is. Is that we're like, oh, well, we're gonna hold this Black hued person to this different standard versus that person. And it comes into a play where you guys were saying, like, economics. I've had people question my authority as a doctor because I'm darker. Not to mention I'm a woman. But how did you get to that position? How did you accomplish this? Or, you have to work, 12 times harder and things like that because people see you however they see you, and it's really unfortunate. It's very unfortunate. And then once you see certain people, they feel like there's no room for anybody else at the top. We're constantly pitted against one another. Oh,
Mhm.
there's that one guy from IT, he can only be the only black dark skinned person there, you know? And I don't like it. I don't like it. I hate the divisiveness of it.
Mm-hmm.
Same here. Just that divisive nature is what gets to us, right? And I'm happy Brother Anthony brought the economic aspect to it, right? Yeah, and me and my boys right now we're working on a research on Black Wall Street, right? From when O.W. Gurley had it 1906 to 1921 when it got destroyed. You can see how successful we were as a people just with that community where the black dollar rotated around the community 35 to 100 times, right? You had sons of a former slave who who was a who were millionaires or not in that community. I bet you there were light skin and dark skin, right?
Mhm.
Did we see a
Yeah.
division there? But also another question that we got to ask is, did we even have an option? Right? We
Right.
had to be with one another. So we have to look at, yes, we're excited that there was solidarity. So this colorism piece for me is just, I see that it stops us from having the solidarity that we should have as a people. And being someone who has traveled and saw how it is in Africa and also in Brazil or Colombia, it's sad to know that this is what really cripples us also as a people, and it does affect us economically. So once again, that's why I got to thank you, Brother Anthony, for mentioning that piece, because with the current trajectory, 20 years from now, us as Black people, our net worth is going to be $0, right? And the number one person who is disrespected, as Malcolm X said before, is a Black woman, right, in America. So with 2017, the Nielsen ratings, when they said that the Black woman in America is the most influential person in the world, and she would add $1 trillion to the Black economy. The question we should have is, if she's that influential, why is she at the bottom of the barrel, right?
Great question.
That's the question we should have. And also, the darker you are, the more bottom you get to be. Like you're all the way to the very very bottom. So the, the solidarity is what we're missing as a people, even when it comes to us as Black people in general, with the diversity we have, the diaspora in here. There's a disconnect, right? If you look at Rwanda, the Hutus, if you had a longer nose and your structure was different from someone who had a little bit of a wider nose, you basically were like the Belgians like the ones with the longer nose. So they created this division. That's why the genocide happened, right, between the Hutus and the Tutsis. Is something that was created by the colonialists, the Belgians. What they did to Congo was cut people's hands, but in Rwanda, uh, it was basically, listen, if you have a longer nose or you have this type of structure, you're beautiful. But that other person from this other ethnic group, they're not beautiful, right? So it's not just with colorism, but also what do we see that the white man, uh, thought was beautiful, or how did he want to divide us as a people? So we should even look at Rwanda itself, like with what happened, like with hundreds of thousands of people who were killed, the massacre that happened. So I see the Eurocentric paradigm is something that we really need to go deeper into, like when it comes to like what even our children are being taught. We need to look at Afrocentric history, and Afrocentric is basically the totality of Blackness across the world, because we're all over the world, right? So the divisiveness, I think colorism.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I was in Africa last year in 2019, and I was just like, oh my gosh, as soon as I got there, I was like, I'm here, I'm with my people. And then they were like, no, you're American. And it was very like, wait, but we look the same. And they were like, no, we don't want you. Like, we don't want you. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah,
I'm like, where do I fit in then? Where's my home?
and it's different, right? Like, but we also have to appreciate Ghana. Ghana has the largest number of African Americans going back
Mm-hmm.
to basically gain what you call citizenship and to stay as home, right? Because we have what, over 25,000 or more now, counting. Last year, Ghana was the only country that had, was doing the welcoming piece, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
So they're
welcome.
offering the dual citizenship, right?
Yeah, yeah, and it was like so last year was the year of the return,
Mm-hmm.
and April I was in Ghana. It was so beautiful seeing how Ghana is taking the approach, right? Another beautiful thing that folks don't know about right now is that the African Union actually has a strategy for including the Black diaspora in plans, right? So, and the U.S., the Black community here in the U.S., our Black diaspora here is the one that the African Union actually is looking at fully as well. That never happened in Africa. You never had the AU saying, because of George Floyd, we want the UN to do something about it. That never used to happen before, right? So things are changing slowly, but still, we still have that situation whereby there's still a division, right?
Yeah.
100%. And you go to Africa, they look at you. Even for me, I don't have a typical Somali accent. So if I went back to Somalia, they'll be like, "Yeah, you're that American." I'm in the market, they'll take advantage of me, trying to catch me with a higher price. Like, they try to with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree. My last thought on this is that I agree. I feel like change begins within, and I really try to educate my children on all things Black. If they're not going to get it in school, they're going to get it from me. The best to the best of my ability.
Right.
And I do believe that I just wish we'd realize we're Black people. Let's work together. Let's not work against one another. We're Black. We're all beautiful.
Right. Yeah, I would just say that like I just appreciate this conversation on colorism. Jackie and I have talked about this before, where we'll make a post about colorism, and I think the go-to for us as a protection measure is let's not talk about colorism. It's divisive, it's just going to divide people. To me, that's likened to white people saying let's not talk about why Black Lives Matter, or let's not talk about the injustices that are going on with Black people specifically. Let's act like it doesn't exist because we want to be colorblind, and because if we pretend that it doesn't exist, then we're not going to be being divisive. Whereas I think when we ignore the conversation, we can't heal. If we don't deal with it, we can't heal. So I just appreciate, you guys being willing to talk about colorism and be transparent about it. I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
I think I can speak for my brothers when I say we appreciate y'all for bringing this. And also, Misha, we should. It's a must. Like, we need to talk about these topics 100%. Because even if you look at racism itself, the research and science, backs it up, saying that we should actually, and as Black people, or even other folks of color, we talk to our children about race more than white parents, and white parents are the ones who actually, statistically, like, data shows that they don't do that. And what research says about this is that we should challenge children's assumption about racism and in general. That's what research tells folks. So some parents have this protective factor, mostly white parents, actually, because I'm going to go back to that research piece, and they did a bunch of them, even at the University of Texas, and they're saying you need to challenge the assumption of children when it comes to race or racism in general, right? Because whether you like it or not, science has shown that children at a very younger age tend to learn more about race.
The differences.
Yeah, and we think that, they're just little, they don't know this. But also, for some white parents, we need to also respect the fact that they might not have a negative piece to it, but it's a protective factor, as in, I don't want to teach my child about this racism piece out here because I'm trying to protect my kid, right? He lives in a world where he doesn't see color. That's what a lot of folks try to say. We need to challenge people. So for us as a people, I say we need to challenge our assumptions about colorism, right? All these other topics. Like, I can say, as a Black person who has, an African piece where I know the tribe that I come from, and I can count all the way to the 15th century in terms of my great grandparents. Like, we are so diverse as Black people, and that's our beauty. Like, you can go to Somalia and you have different shades. You can have the darkest of the dark, and you can have the lightest of the light. And then, but the beauty amongst us is the same. That's how we see it, 100%. Even back home in Africa, colorism is huge. And there's a nickname in Somali that says "Ade." Ade with a C, so we spell it CADE. CA to us is a vowel that brings out the A. Like, Arabic and ours is almost the same. We use the same vowels. Ade means the lighter complexion. So, and that is used as a compliment, right?
Yeah.
or if it's a girl's name, like let's say a sister's name is Aisha, just if she's light skinned, then the mother probably will say Aisha Ade, Aisha the lighter complexion, right? Or then they'll say the Ade Ade means white.
Jackie, can you go on mute?
Ade. What was that?
I was saying, Jackie, if Jackie could go on mute.
Oh, I just muted him.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna unmute in 1 second.
Okay, so basically, Ad means white, but Ade obviously is that light, super lighter complexion right there, right? So even to us as a society, what has been put in our languages because of colonization, the Italians colonized the South, and you had the North colonized by the Brits. What did they leave behind? You know, after colonization, we put our flags up, but the division is still there, 100%. Like to a point whereby you feel like calling someone the lighter one, the whiter one, that is more of a compliment. It just shows how the mental slavery that has been implanted in us is worse than when we were in shackles. That was basically the physical, right? It's just once again going back to that 1712 letter by Willie Lynch. Keep the body, take the mind. That's what we have today. We got the body, but the mind sometimes has been taken away fully. Right. So it's thank you so much. This is an important topic that I'll be honest with you. It's the first time since I came back from Brazil last time that I'm hearing a conversation about color.
Okay, awesome.
All right.
Oh, did we lose Jackie? I think we did.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. I mean, I don't want to hold you guys up anymore. I know some people want to go and catch the debate, what's left of it.
Catch the lies.
Yeah. Yeah. Any parting thoughts, Anthony or Eddie?
Hey, I appreciate everybody for joining in here, getting this insight, all of this knowledge. Appreciate that. Definitely talks that need to happen amongst our people. Need more participation. Spreading the word. Just create the unity, because we are Black people, and again we have hues that range from A to Z.
Right.
We need to be one. We're afraid of ourselves a lot of times. You walk down a block or something, you see somebody, you're afraid of your own people. It shouldn't be like that.
Yeah.
Because now we're afraid of ourselves, and we're afraid of
them.
else. So now you just all alone.
Right.
Which is not good.
Right.
I don't have any parting thoughts other than I appreciate the conversation and the thought process that everybody shared, and hopefully we can continue to have this conversation and keep it going on this topic and others.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
There you go.
All right, guys.
Good night.
Night.
Peace.